The sun had just begun its lazy descent beyond the horizon, casting a golden glow over our quaint neighborhood. The shadows stretched like yawning cats across manicured lawns and pristine driveways, each house standing as a monument to suburban perfection. It was a place where the chirp of crickets was the loudest evening song, and the gentle rustle of leaves the softest gossip. Our community was governed by the iron fist of the Homeowners Association, a body typically as invisible as it was invincible. But at its helm stood Karen, a woman whose presence was anything but subtle, with her clipboard clutched tightly and a perpetual scowl etched on her face. She prowled the neighborhood like some self-appointed enforcer. It began with a letter. A crisp white envelope slipped into my mailbox, the HOA's insignia embossed on the corner. Inside, a note penned with the cold precision of a court summons. The grass on my front lawn, it stated, had grown precisely 2 inches too long. A violation, they called it, of neighborhood standards. I chuckled softly, the sound mingling with the evening breeze. Nature had a way of rebelling against such arbitrary lines and rules, and so did I. But I trimmed the lawn anyway, imagining each snip of the mower as a gentle rebuke to the absurdity of it all. Peace was a garden I tended in my mind, watered with patience and fertilized with understanding. Karen, however, was not one to be deterred. Her next complaint arrived with the punctuality of a Swiss train. My recycling bin, she noted, had been left out an hour past collection time. An oversight, surely, yet one that pricked her sensibilities like a thorn. I imagined her standing sentinel at her window, watchdog of the waste. My response was measured, a nod to diplomacy. I made a mental note to be more vigilant. But the calm was merely the eye of a brewing storm. Karen's persistence was an art form, a relentless pursuit of order in a world that thrived on chaos. Weeks passed each day carrying a new grievance wrapped in polite but pointed prose, a wind chime that jingled too joyously in the night wind, a garden gnome deemed too whimsical for our uniform lawns, a porch light that dared to shine a tad too brightly. Each note was a symphony of pettiness conducted with unwavering dedication. Through it all, I maintained my tranquil facade, my inner monologue a stream of sardonic amusement. Karen was a force of nature, as predictable as the tide, yet as unstoppable as time itself. But every storm has its counterbalance, a calm at its core. That calm was my friend the sheriff. A friendship forged in the fires of shared history and mutual respect. He was a man of few words but great wisdom, the kind who saw through the smoke and mirrors to the heart of the matter. As Karen's latest threat arrived, a promise to escalate my apparent transgressions to the authorities, I felt the scales begin to tip, a subtle shift like the first tremor before an earthquake. It was time to respond, not with fireworks or fanfare, but with the quiet strength of a bond forged in trust and understanding. I reached for my phone, a single word on the brink of my lips, ready to set in motion a chain of events Karen could never have foreseen. But for now, the evening was still. The neighborhood serene under the watchful gaze of the setting sun. I stood there, the chill of the coming night, brushing my skin, and let the moment stretch a calm before the storm. The morning after Karen's threat, the neighborhood seemed to dawn with a peculiar energy, one that buzzed with whispered conspiracies and rustling curtains. I stepped outside, feeling the crisp air wrap around my thoughts. It was a scene of serene suburban chaos, meticulously trim lawns standing like obedient soldiers despite the undercurrent of tension that Karen had spun through the air. The letter arrived first, an envelope with no personality. Its contents, however, were a different story. As I unfolded the paper, I could almost feel Karen's presence wafting from the typed words like a perfume cloud. absurdities masquerading as rules dotted the page. New regulations, detailed with the precision of a diamond cutter, decreed the exact permissible length of grass blades and the acceptable hue of garden gnomes. Every word was a testament to Karen's relentless pursuit of her own brand of order. For a moment, I considered the irony. Here was a woman who wielded bylaws like a knight wields a sword, crafting her kingdom from paperwork and pettiness. A power trip thinly veiled as community service. Then came the citations, a flurry of them, landing on my doorstep like unwanted invitations to a party I'd rather not attend. They spoke of infractions that bordered on the ridiculous: a misplaced recycle bin, a garden hose left coiled a foot too far from its designated spot. Each citation a chapter in Karen's ever-growing tome of pettiness and control. The rumors came next, snaking their way through the grapevine of neighborhood chatter. Whispers followed me like shadows, insubstantial but persistent. Stories of my supposed disregard for community aesthetics, my alleged disdain for neighborhood harmony. Karen's influence seeped into conversations like a slow-spreading ink blot, turning neighbor against neighbor, until even friendly nods were stained with suspicion. I could feel Karen's gaze on me at every turn, like a hawk watching over its territory, waiting for the slightest misstep. But I remained calm, my resolve as unyielding as a granite cliff against her tide. She could have her rules, her citations, her gossip. I had something far more potent: patience. And then the sheriff arrived. Not the one Karen had envisioned, storming in with flashing lights and blaring sirens ready to enforce her reign of terror. No, this was my friend. The actual sheriff, strolling up my driveway, with a casual wave and an amused glint in his eyes. A silent reminder of the true balance of power. We stood there in the soft glow of the afternoon sun, unmoving, as the world continued its gentle spin around us. No words were needed. The irony was as palpable as the wind that danced through the trees, a quiet promise that Karen's machinations would not go unchecked. As he left, I couldn't help but smile, a small defiant act in the face of Karen's orchestrated chaos. Her rules might have been set, her plans laid bare like a chessboard awaiting a move. But in life, as in chess, it's not always the queen who holds the ultimate power. The neighborhood remained her stage for now, but I was content to wait in the wings watching. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing your time will come. A slow burn, a quiet revolution ready to unfold when the moment is just right. The morning sun cast long shadows over the neighborhood, painting the streets in hues of gold and gray. Time moved like molasses, each tick of the clock a reminder of the impending showdown. I sipped my coffee with deliberate slowness, feeling the comforting warmth spread through my fingers, grounding me for what lay ahead. The garden was my sanctuary, a personal escape from the relentless chaos Karen seemed intent on sowing. Her latest threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, promising thunderous consequences. But it wasn't fear. That drove me now. It was a quiet resolve I had prepared meticulously, every detail noted in a journal that had grown as thick as an old tome. Each entry was a testament to her intrusive reign. From the trivial grievances about garden gnomes to the more absurd accusations of my wind chimes, violating noise ordinances, her complaints were the stuff of suburban legend. Her threats had escalated, culminating in a promise to involve the sheriff. It was a move designed to intimidate, to remind everyone that her influence extended far beyond the neatly trimmed hedges and pastel-colored houses. But little did she know. My own connections ran deeper, laced with irony and a pinch of sweet justice. You see, the sheriff was no stranger to my world. He was an old friend, a relic of childhood days spent in sun-drenched fields and teenage nights filled with laughter. A man who understood the value of peace over power. With methodical precision, I leafed through the pages of my journal, each scrawl a memory encapsulated. The ink had bled in places, rainstorms of frustration captured on paper. I read the entries like one might study a roadmap, tracing the journey from her initial polite inquiries to the veiled threats that now loomed like a specter. My documentation was my weapon, a silent testament to her tyranny. I held it close, knowing its weight would tip the scales in my favor. The air was thick with anticipation as I made my way to the HOA meeting. The community center was a sterile place filled with folding chairs and the faint smell of coffee. Faces familiar yet distant filled the room, each casting furtive glances at one another, waiting for the performance to begin. And there she was, Karen, seated like a queen surveying her domain, her eyes a flint of steel ready to strike. I took my place, letting the calm wash over me. The meeting droned on, a prelude to the confrontation brewing beneath the surface. When the moment finally arrived, Karen's voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. It carried the weight of authority demanding attention. She spoke of rules of order and of the so-called transgressions that threatened the very fabric of our neighborhood. But then there was silence, a pause pregnant with expectation, and in that silence I rose my journal. Clutched tightly, the pages filled with the truth of her reign. I locked eyes with her, a small smile playing at the corners of my lips. The moment hung suspended, a tableau of confrontation and revelation. I spoke then not with words, but with the evidence carefully compiled over months. Each page turned was a counterpoint to her accusations, a mirror reflecting her own folly. The room held its breath, eyes darting between us, the tension, a living thing. In that charged silence, the sheriff's presence became known, a figure of quiet authority entering the fray. His nod was subtle, yet it spoke volumes. Karen's facade cracked the veneer of control, slipping as reality settled in. The power she wielded so freely was now a double-edged sword, her own actions laid bare. As the meeting concluded, her departure was swift. A retreat, masked as a dignified exit. The irony was not lost on me. And so the storm passed, leaving behind the calm of a battle, won not through might, but through the simple, profound weight of truth. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the neighborhood. It was the kind of evening where the air seemed to hum with the lazy anticipation of dusk, a perfect setting for the storm brewing beneath the semblance of suburban calm. Karen's voice, previously so assured and authoritative, was now a whisper carried by the breeze, lost amongst the chirping of crickets. Her threats to call the sheriff had hung in the air, lingering like a storm cloud. Yet with my quiet connection to the actual sheriff, I had watched her bravado falter ever so slightly. There was a quiet power in knowing the cards I held. The neighborhood, once a chorus of neighborly greetings and children's laughter, had grown hushed. People were noticing. They always did. Curtains fluttered as curious eyes peered out, hungry for drama, for something to break the monotony of their well-manicured lives. Outwardly, the houses stood lined in perfect symmetry, but beneath that facade, tensions simmered like a pot ready to boil over. Karen's iron grip over the HOA had been as enduring as the ancient oak that stood at the neighborhood's entrance. Her rules were the roots that snaked through every yard, every conversation. But now, those roots were beginning to wither. People whispered, subtle glances, exchanged at mailboxes, trivial conversations laced with the unspoken question, what would happen next? My phone buzzed, a subtle reminder of the connection I maintained with my friend the sheriff. It was a lifeline of calm amid the growing chaos. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. The very weapon Karen had planned to wield against me was now a shield. The neighbors had always seen me as an enigma, the quiet one who never quite fit into the chiseled mold of HOA conformity. There was power in that too. Now that power was shifting like sand beneath the tide. Karen could sense it. Her fortress built on rules and regulations was crumbling, and she knew it. I walked through the neighborhood, a silent observer of the unfolding drama. The lawns were immaculate, each blade of grass standing at attention. Yet something was fundamentally altered. Karen's house, which had once seemed a beacon of control, now loomed like a relic of a bygone era. Its pristine exterior betrayed nothing of the turmoil within. The turning point came with a single knock, a hesitant, almost apologetic sound at my door. A neighbor, her eyes a blend of curiosity and unease. She spoke then, a rare breach of my self-imposed silence. It was a simple exchange. Words carefully chosen revealing more in what was left unsaid. A shifting allegiance. A realization that Karen's reign was not without end. As I watched her leave, I felt the neighborhood exhale a collective breath held too long. The tension was palpable, a living thing that danced in the shadows of twilight. Change was coming. A quiet revolution in a world where conformity had always been king. I stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down like the encroaching night. Karen's threats had been rendered impotent, turned back upon her like a boomerang she couldn't dodge. In the quiet recesses of my mind, a final thought. Sometimes the greatest victories are won, not with confrontation, but with the silent exposure of truth. And with that, I turned back inside, letting the door close with a soft click, the sound of resolution in a world poised on the brink of transformation. The warm amber glow of the morning sun filtered through my kitchen window, casting gentle shadows on the oak floor. I stood at the counter, my fingers tracing the rim of a steaming cup of coffee, feeling the quiet power that comes from knowing exactly what to do next. Karen had left her mark metaphorically and literally on the neighborhood. Her threats had become the soundtrack of our lives, her voice an ever-present drone of dissatisfaction. Her fixation on our perceived infractions knew no bounds. But what she didn't know was that beneath my calm exterior, the wheels of justice had already begun to turn. The HOA meeting loomed large in my mind like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. I felt the impending tension as I flipped through the documents neatly stacked beside me. Restraint was my weapon of choice, a quiet, calculating force that moves unseen until it's too late to stop. My friend the sheriff had been a silent partner in this unfolding drama. His presence was a calm, reassuring bass note beneath the chaos. His advice was simple. Document everything. So I did. Every email, every recorded conversation, every photograph of her, unauthorized alterations to her property. All of it meticulously organized and ready for the precise moment to reveal. The community center where we held our HOA meetings was a modest building. Its beige walls and fluorescent lights had seen many a heated debate, but today felt different. There was a palpable energy, an undercurrent of anticipation. As I entered, I could see Karen already seated, her expression a mix of smugness and simmering hostility. I took my place, my gaze steady. I could see the curiosity in my neighbor's eyes, a silent question hanging in the air. They knew something was coming. We all did. The meeting commenced with the usual formalities. It wasn't until the agenda turned to neighborhood disputes that the room shifted. The air became electric as Karen began her usual litany of grievances. I listened, absorbing her words with the patience of a cat watching a mouse. And then the moment arrived. A pause. Pregnant with possibilities, I stood feeling the weight of every eye upon me. With a calm, deliberate motion, I placed the document on the table. Its rustling was a whisper of secrets about to be unveiled. I spoke, choosing my words with care. The room was silent. The only sound, the quiet hum of the overhead fan. My voice carried steady and unwavering through the space between us. I'd outlined the bylaws, detailed the infractions, and with quiet authority revealed the consequences of her actions. For a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Karen's face was a canvas of disbelief, slowly transforming into outrage. But the evidence was incontrovertible, a fortress built brick by brick from her own actions. Her threats were empty echoes now reverberating in a room that no longer feared her wrath. In one last desperate act, Karen made her stand, her voice rising like a siren's wail. But it was too late. The sheriff, my silent ally in this battle, had already moved to her side, a tangible reminder of the inevitability of justice. As the meeting concluded, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. Karen's reign of terror had ended not with a bang, but with the quiet unfolding of truth. As I left the room, I felt the lightness of a burden lifted. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I walked home savoring the tranquility that had returned to our neighborhood. The world was right again, balanced on the scales of patience and persistence. And as I closed my door behind me, I knew that the story of Karen was one that would linger, a cautionary tale whispered among neighbors, a reminder of the quiet power that lies within us all. The sun slouched toward the horizon, casting long shadows across our once troubled neighborhood. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, whispering secrets only nature understood. The cul-de-sac felt different now, less tense, as though the street itself had exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. Our little community nestled here on Maple Lane had endured quite the saga. Yet, standing on the edge of resolution, I found myself reflecting on how a single person's unchecked ambition could turn harmony into discord. Karen had always been a force, a human tempest wrapped in floral print, with an unwavering belief that her vision for the neighborhood was the only vision. Her threats to call the sheriff had been her latest power play. Little did she know my friend Sam, the actual sheriff, had grown up just a few blocks away and knew every inch of Maple Lane like the back of his hand. It was poetic, really. The very authority she wished to wield was intimately familiar with our struggles and with her antics. When Sam arrived that day, the air crackled with anticipation. Karen stood rigid on her porch arms, crossed like an empress surveying her kingdom. Her expression was a mix of defiance and expectation. In her world, this was the moment she had been waiting for, her ultimate vindication. But reality has a way of defying expectations, twisting the narrative in the most unexpected ways. Sam approached her with the calm assurance of someone who had seen it all. His uniform was crisp, the badge glinting in the fading daylight, an emblem of authority that bore the weight of justice, not personal vendettas. He didn't need to say much. His presence alone spoke volumes. It was a silent conversation between what was right and what was self-righteous. I watched from a distance, my own heart steady, knowing that this was the turning point. Karen's confidence began to falter. The realization that her tactics had unraveled was a slow dawning dread in her eyes. It was like watching a balloon deflate the air, slowly hissing out until only a sagging shell remained. The irony was palpable. She had called for the sheriff, and the sheriff had come, but not as her ally, as a guardian of the peace she had been disrupting. With Sam's quiet authority to back us, the neighborhood found its voice again. We gathered an unspoken unity forming among us as if we were puzzle pieces, finally clicking into place. Each of us had felt the sting of Karen's reign in one way or another, but now together we stood resilient. There is strength in numbers, a power in collective purpose that no one person, however determined, could undermine. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was the kind of sunset that suggested renewal, the promise of a fresh start. Karen lingered on her porch, the queen without a court watching as her influence slipped away like grains of sand through her fingers. The neighborhood had shifted not out of malice but out of necessity. We chose community over conflict, understanding over obstinacy. As I turned to head home, the wind carried the laughter of children playing the kind of melody that speaks of new beginnings. Maple Lane was back to being the quiet, close-knit place it was meant to be. And as for Karen, well, every story needs its antagonist. She remained in the background, a reminder of how close we came to losing our peace, but also a testament to the power of standing together. In the end, the sheriff's visit was less about enforcement and more about enlightenment. It showed us that in the face of discord, unity and quiet strength could restore what was lost. Calmly, powerfully, we reclaimed our street, and the sun set on Maple Lane, promising a brighter tomorrow.